My name is Catherine Moore, and I was 31 the afternoon my brother stood at our father's grave and read from a piece of paper he'd folded into quarters. He'd written the eulogy himself. I knew because I'd helped him practice it in the hotel room the night before, crossing out adjectives, smoothing out the rhythms. What I didn't know was that he'd already emptied our father's house. Every box, every photo album, every scrap of paper that might have told me the truth. Our father died on a Tuesday in October. Lung cancer, diagnosed 6 weeks earlier, gone too fast for anyone to say the things that needed saying. I flew in from Seattle, where I'd been living for 9 years. My brother, Mark, lived 20 minutes from our father's house in suburban Virginia. He'd been the one to drive him to appointments, to pick up prescriptions, to sit with him in the dark when the morphine made him see things that weren't there. I was grateful for that. I told him so at the funeral home, standing in front of the casket, my hand on his shoulder. I said, "You did the hard work. I just flew in at the end." He didn't say anything. He just nodded and looked at his shoes. I should have noticed that nod. It was too quick, too relieved. But I didn't notice because I was too busy grieving. Our father was a complicated man. Distant when we were kids, warmer as we got older, never quite able to say "I love you" without looking away. But he was our only parent. Our mother had died when I was 12, and Mark was 10. He'd raised us alone after that. Badly sometimes, but alone. I thought I knew him. I thought I knew Mark. I was wrong about both. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. If you've ever lost a parent and discovered that the person standing next to you at the grave knew something you didn't, stay with me. Because the part you came for happens late. And it's worth the wait. The first sign came 3 days after the funeral. I asked Mark for a copy of the will. He said there wasn't one. Our father had died intestate, he said. Everything would go through probate. The house would be sold, the proceeds split, end of story. I asked about the life insurance. He said there wasn't any. Our father had let it lapse years ago, he said. Financial troubles. Nothing left. I asked about the savings accounts, the retirement funds, the safe deposit box I remembered our father mentioning when I was a teenager. Mark shook his head. "There's nothing, Catherine, I'm sorry. He spent it all on medical bills toward the end." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my brother. He'd been there. I'd been 3,000 miles away, building a life in Seattle, calling every Sunday, sending birthday cards, flying home for Christmas when I could afford it. Mark had stayed. Mark had done the work. If he said there was nothing, there was nothing. Except 6 weeks after the funeral, I got a call from a woman named Mrs. Patricia Holloway. She was the receptionist at our father's oncologist's office. She'd found my number in his file. She said she was sorry to bother me, but she had something she thought I should see. A letter. Our father had given it to her a week before he died, with instructions to mail it to me after the funeral. She'd forgotten. She was apologizing profusely. Would I like her to read it over the phone or send it? I gave her my address. The letter arrived 3 days later. It was short, 1 page, handwritten in the shaking script my father had developed in his last months. It said, "Catherine, the house isn't the only thing. There's a trust. Your grandmother's." I never told Mark about it because I knew what he'd do. "The paperwork is in the lockbox behind the water heater in the basement. The combination is your mother's birthday. I'm sorry I wasn't braver. I love you. Dad." I sat on my Seattle apartment floor with that letter in my hands and did the math. My brother had told me there was no lockbox. He told me there was no paperwork. He told me there was nothing. But he'd emptied the house before I got there. He'd had 6 weeks to find that lockbox. And if he'd found it, he'd had 6 weeks to decide whether to tell me. I called Mark that night. I didn't mention the letter. I asked him, casually, if he'd found anything unusual in the basement. A lockbox, maybe. Old documents. He paused. Then he said, "No, nothing, just old paint cans and mouse droppings." I asked if I could fly out and go through the house myself. Just for closure. Just to see it one more time before it's sold. He said, "There's no point. I've already cleared everything out. It's all in storage. I'll send you photos." I said okay. I hung up, and I booked a flight for the next morning. The house was empty. That part was true. Mark had done a thorough job. No furniture, no pictures, no boxes. Just dust and carpet stains and the smell of the lavender air freshener my father had hated. I walked through every room, touching the walls, trying to feel something other than betrayal. The basement was cold. Concrete floor. A water heater in the corner, just like the letter said. Behind it, a small indentation in the wall where someone had cut out a rectangle of drywall and patched it badly. The lockbox was gone. I sat on the basement floor in my dead father's empty house and let myself feel the full weight of what my brother had done. He'd found it. He'd opened it. He'd taken whatever was inside. And he'd left the patch so obvious that he must have known I'd find it eventually. Or maybe he didn't care. Maybe he thought I was too far away to matter. I didn't confront him that night. I went to a hotel and made a list. The list had 3 columns, things I knew, things I suspected, things I could prove, things I knew. My grandmother had been wealthy. She'd owned property in 2 states. She'd adored me and Mark equally, but she'd worried about Mark's spending habits. She'd once told me when I was 16 that she'd set up something for later. I'd forgotten that until now. Things I suspected. That something was a trust. That my father had been the executor. That Mark had found the paperwork and was hiding it. Things I could prove. Nothing. Yet. I hired a lawyer. A woman named Diane Kim who specialized in estate litigation. She was expensive. $250 an hour, which was most of my savings, but she listened to my story without once looking at her watch. When I finished, she said, "Your brother made a mistake. He left a trail." She filed a petition to compel discovery. That's legal language for show me everything, or I'll assume you're hiding something. Mark had 30 days to produce any and all documents related to our father's estate, including trusts, life insurance policies, and safe deposit box inventories. On day 29, his lawyer produced a stack of papers. The trust had been real. My grandmother had left a little over $400,000 in a trust for her grandchildren, to be distributed at our father's discretion after her death. Our father had never told us about it. He'd kept it as a safety net, maybe. Or maybe he'd been waiting for the right time. We'll never know. What we do know is that Mark found the paperwork 3 days after our father died. He signed his own name to a distribution form, forging our father's signature, which was already illegal, and had the entire amount transferred into an account in his name only. He did this 11 days before the funeral, before I even flew in. $412,000. My share was $206,000. Mark had taken it all. I sat in Diane Kim's office with the paperwork spread across her conference table and felt something I never felt before. Not sadness, not anger. Something colder. Something that felt like the opposite of hope. It was the feeling of realizing that someone you love is not the person you thought they were. And they never were. You just didn't want to see it. Diane asked if I wanted to sue. She said the case was strong. The forgery alone was enough to win. But she also said it would take years, cost tens of thousands in legal fees, and permanently destroy any relationship I had left with my brother. I asked her what she would do if it were her. She said, "I'd send him one letter. Then I'd decide." I wrote the letter that night. It was short. I said I knew about the trust. I said I knew he'd forged our father's signature. I said I had documentation that would hold up in court. Then I said, "You have 30 days to send me my half. If you do, I won't sue. I won't tell the rest of the family. You can keep your life, but you won't keep me in it." I gave him my address and the wire transfer information. Then I waited. Day 29, the money arrived. $206,000, wired from an account I didn't recognize. No note, no apology, no explanation. Just the money. I didn't cash it for 2 weeks. I let it sit there in the digital void, while I decided what kind of person I wanted to be. The kind who keeps the money and walks away. The kind who sends it back and walks away with nothing but her pride. The kind who keeps the money and tries to fix something that can't be fixed. I kept it. Not because I needed it. I did, but that wasn't the reason. I kept it because it was mine. My grandmother's gift. My father's failure to tell me about it didn't make it less mine. Mark's theft didn't make it less mine. It had always been mine. I was just finally holding it. I used some of it to buy a small house in Seattle. A craftsman with a porch and a garden where I grow tomatoes that never quite ripen. I used some of it to start a scholarship at the community college where I teach writing. The scholarship is for first-generation students whose families don't believe in them. I named it after my grandmother. I didn't use any of it to contact my brother. That was 5 years ago. Mark and I don't speak. He sends a Christmas card every year with a photo of his wife and kids. I throw them away without opening them. That sounds cruel, I know. But here's the thing about cruelty. Sometimes it's just clarity. I don't want to know his children's names. I don't want to watch them grow up in photos. I don't want to pretend that we're family when he stole from me, while I was still wearing black to our father's funeral. My mother would have hated this. She was the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over, the one who said, "Life's too short, and family is everything." But my mother also died when I was 12, which means she never got to see what her son became. Maybe she would have understood. Maybe she would have told me to forgive him anyway. I'll never know. What I do know is that forgiveness is not a requirement. It's an option, and some betrayals don't deserve it. I think about my father's letter sometimes, the one he wrote from his hospital bed, hiding from his own son, trusting a receptionist to mail it after he was gone. "I'm sorry I wasn't braver," he wrote. I used to be angry at him for that, for not telling me sooner, for leaving me to find out the hard way. But I'm not angry anymore. He was dying. He was scared. He did the best he could with the time he had left. And in the end, he told me the truth. That's more than Mark ever did. If you're reading this and you've been betrayed by someone who shares your blood, here is what I want you to remember. Family is not a debt you owe forever. It's a relationship. And relationships require two people to show up. If you're the only one showing up, you're not in a relationship. You're in a hostage situation. Drop a comment if you've ever had to cut off a family member to save yourself. Hit subscribe if you believe that inheritance isn't just about money. It's about what you do with the truth once you finally have it. I'll see you in the next one.